cradles her body in his arms, and he feels great sadness over her death, and he wishes that she were still alive. And miraculously, she comes back. The gunshot wound is instantly healed, and Corrigan thinks, my goodness, I also have the ability to restore life. And Clarice looks up at him and says, Jim, I thought you were going to die. And Jim says, oh, no, it's okay, honey. After you got taken away, I was able to fight my way back. Nothing's happened to me. My suit's a little worse for wear, but I'm good. We're together. Let's go. And you can see that Jim is honestly happy at this. And he's thinking, this is great. I've got these supernatural powers now, and my fiance doesn't know any different. I look human. I sound human. Apparently, I feel human to the touch. But on the drive to the party, Jim has a change of heart. And this is where we start to see real redeeming qualities in Jim Corrigan, that he considers that it's not fair to Clarice to live out her life with a living ghost. I mean, for all he knows, he will never age, but she will. And, this isn't stated in the book itself, but one can imagine that Jim is thinking, we probably can never have kids, and what if she wants to be a mother? Just in general, he's thinking it's not right to make her live with someone whose life is now a lie. And so he takes Clarice to a party and he says, okay, you're going into the party, but I'm not going with you. In fact, we're done. The engagement's off. I just don't want to be with you. And it stuns Clarice, and she says, well, why? What happened? And he says, well, can't you see, I've just lost interest. And she pleads with him to change his mind. And he says, no, can't you see this is hard enough for me? It's time to go. So he does crack a little bit in Clarice's presence, but he puts on that hard-boiled nature just enough that Clarice goes off in tears, and we can see it once she's out of his sight. He's hurting pretty bad too. But later on the car ride, his resolve to let Clarice go and have a life amongst the living is strengthened when he notices something. Even though it's a colder evening and his breath should leave some fog or condensation on the driver's side mirror, there's nothing. The window is perfectly clear. And Jim has this alarmed look on his face. He says, my goodness, so I really am dead. I'm not even breathing. And so this strengthens his resolve to really cut his ties with everything. So he goes back to the boarding house and he says to Wayne, you know what? We'll be partners on the force, but that's it. I'm moving out of the boarding house. I'm not living with you anymore. Good luck. I'm getting a place of my own. And so in a newly furnished sitting room in an apartment which he now rents on his own, Jim cobbles together a costume that will cover his body from head to toe. It's primarily a white bodysuit that covers his entire body, including the entirety of his head, but he matches it with pixie boots, gloves, trunks, and a hooded cloak, and he gives the standard comic book warning to all would-be evildoers out there to beware of the wrath of the Spectre. And so he begins his mission of wiping the earth clean of all evil. Now, a lot of comics historians say the Spectre's origin is a two-part story in issues 52 and 53, but issue 54 is actually quite important because it gives us further insight into the Spectre's abilities, and it really finalizes terms of his relationship with Clarice Winston going forward. So in issue number 54, More Fun Comics, we see that probably a little bit of time has passed, and Jim continues to work as a police detective. Nobody realizes that he's a earthbound ghost. And he's still enjoying quite a bit of success as the ultra hard-boiled detective. The problem, though, is that Clarice keeps on coming back to him, saying, Jim, please, reconsider, please. I know you love me, please. And so he has to say to her, no, we're done. I'm not seeing you anymore. I can't get into it. Just leave me go. But then she comes to him after one case and says, I've got this mystic who's living at my parents' home, and I don't trust him. I think he's trying to rob my parents of all of their money. And so Jim considers this, and he thinks, well, there's a possible criminal case here, so I am duty-bound to investigate. So he does agree to go to her home one evening, has an interesting reunion with his would-be mother-in-law, meets this mystic, and they sit at the table together. The mystic goes off to do some work in another room, and that allows Jim to create an invisible duplicate of himself. And the invisible duplicate takes on the guise of the Spectre. And this duplicate is able to spy on the mystic. Learn that the mystic is a fraud who's bilking the Winston family out of their money. And so after the duplicate merges with Jim, he confronts the mystic, who then goes on the run. Now, in the course of Jim trying to take down the mystic hurls a weapon, and it delivers a would-be fatal blow to Clarice. And at this point, the voice makes his presence felt yet again. Sorry, I know. The in-joke's getting tired. The voice says to Corrigan, listen, Jim Corrigan, I have reconsidered, and you will be freed from this mission to eradicate all evil from the earth, and you will be allowed to go to your eternal rest. However, do know that Clarice Winston will die from her wound, and this time you will not have a chance to use the powers I've given you to restore her to life. In other words, Corrigan, if you want Clarice to continue living, you will have to accept being the Spectre forever. And it doesn't take long for Jim to reach a decision, and he decides that he will stay on Earth as the Spectre, and so he's able to take down the mystic, he's able to heal Clarice, and as he departs, Clarice thinks that she heard Jim or felt his presence. But of course, the Spectre has moved on to, once again, continue his ongoing battle against evil. So, a pretty powerful, and pretty comprehensive Golden Age origin. Of all the Golden Age origin stories I've read, this is certainly the longest and the most detailed. I mean, you think about it, in the Golden Age, the origin stories were so very quick. Usually they were told on the first page, the first couple of pages. I mean, Superman's origin in Action Comics #1 took all of one page. Batman didn't get his origin until after about 6 months. But even then, it was only a couple of pages. Dr. Fate's origin, I think, was maybe a couple of pages. I guess Wonder Woman's Golden Age origin was somewhat lengthy, but it included the whole backstory on the Amazons as well. I mean, today, comic book origins are so heavily decompressed, and you don't see the hero in costume until after maybe the third or fourth part. Here, with the Spectre's origin, it's amazing that we didn't see Jim Corrigan put on a costume until the end of the second part of his origin. And so it's because his origin is so comprehensive that I think that this is why so many writers have shied away from expanding on Jim's origin over the years. It's pretty hard for him to add any extra detail to the story itself. It's just, so again, comprehensive and detailed. There aren't any holes here. John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake, they certainly added extra layers to Spectre's origin during their run, but it was more with regards to explaining the nature of what came to be known as the Spectre Force. They also provide a whole lot of background information on Jim Corrigan, looking at his early days, what led him to become that hard-boiled detective. In terms of his relationship with Clarice Winston, as it's portrayed over the course of these three issues, even that has stayed intact, with the exception of Ostrander and Mandrake adding an extra layer of meaning behind their relationship, which I'll get into much greater detail in the future. But even there, Mr. Ostrander and Mandrake weren't making readers say, oh, great, so everything we read in this origin story is a lie, it's not the truth. No, you can still read this origin by Siegel and Bailey verbatim and say, yeah, it's all still intact. Ostrander and Mandrake just added an extra perspective to it, which actually really complements the work that Mr. Siegel and Bailey did. The only exception to this has been the New 52, in which Jim Corrigan's origin as the Spectre was rewritten considerably, but that was the New 52, and just about everybody had their origins changed on a massive scale. But otherwise, I'd say that of all the heroes who have been introduced since the golden age of comics, the Spectre's origin is the one that has been changed the least. So that really speaks to the job that Mr. Siegel and Bailey put into this origin story. Now, looking at the timer, my time here is almost up. So this is part 1 of episode number 119. I'll start with part 2 by talking about important precedents that were set by this origin story, certain concepts which were established in this origin that carried through the Spectre's history over the next close to 8 decades. Also talk about his time in the JSA, possible reasons for him wanting to join the JSA. Be talking about the appearance of Percival Pop, the Super Cop, and I'll be looking at a couple of important status quo changes for the Spectre, which came within the Golden Age. So, folks, I'm hoping to get out part 2 in a couple of weeks to you, but if it's 3 or 4 weeks, please don't panic. Part 2 is on its way. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, the email address is comicsandhistory@gmail.com. There's also the Facebook page, which you can check out and like so that you can be kept in the loop on upcoming release dates. So until we meet again in this forum, folks, this class is dismissed.